but one of them was an expert tracking these cases and said that, a lot of the contracts are in Russian, and she's got a copy of a contract, and the problem is not just the Russian authorities. She gets threats from, gangs, middlemen, the criminal underworld, who are facilitating these these foreign fighters to go to countries where there's a Russian consulate or embassy, where they can then get them over, get a holiday visa, and go over to Russia, which was really interesting to understand. Then you realise that when you speak to them, the primary driver isn't the money. That's a secondary. Their primary driver is to get a better life and get out of where they live.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. And this time we are joined by a British Army veteran and Ukraine resident, Shaun Pinner. Shaun fought with Ukraine to defend Mariupol in 2022 and was dramatically released in a prisoner swap after 6 months imprisonment and torture by the Russians. Shaun, we've spoken before. It's great to have you back on Frontline. Thank you for joining us. And you are on your way back home to Ukraine, which has suffered its largest drone strikes of the war in 2 consecutive nights of attacks. What news are you getting from your friends and family there?
Well, unfortunately, it happened in the early hours. This is not anything new. We have to deal with this quite a lot, and this upsurge since really, I believe, since the peace talks that Trump was initiated with Russia. It is definitely an upsurge since then, and obviously, every time any leader has communications with Putin, the repercussions of that are literally bombs. And this is, how many times has this happened now? Quite a few, and we've noticed an upsurge in daylight bombing as well. So it's mass terrorization, really, and attacking civilians in heavily dense populated areas. I'm surprised sometimes how little casualties that we've had, considering their ballistic missiles and drones coming in.
And Shaun, in recent days, mobilisation centres in particular have been targeted. Is that having a significant psychological impact in deterring would-be soldiers?
I don't really see that. There's still a will to fight, especially in Dnipro. I don't. People are tired, and people, Ukrainians want peace. They never wanted this in the first place. So I don't really see that. I see anger building, more and more anger as he attacks, places like Kiev, Kharkiv, and Dnipro. So it is a tactic that didn't work for the Nazis in Germany, during World War II. So, it is building more anger and more resentment. And the community spirit just gets stronger as far as I can see.
And in one of your latest ventures I wanted to talk to you about, you've turned your own experiences of being a POW on its head and have yourself visited the enemy, that's prisoners of war in Ukraine who were fighting for Russia. Really curious to know why you wanted to do this and what your mission was.
Twofold, really. One, I was generally interested in how we were treating Russian prisoners of war. Also, I was quite interested in the influx of, I don't like the term foreign fighters, but generally people that weren't born in Russia, who are now fighting for Russia and invading Ukraine. I mean, it's quite popular now, in the news that people understand that North Koreans here, a patchwork quilt of foreign mercenaries from all over the world. Technically, I wanted to also define the word mercenary. I was branded as a Nazi mercenary terrorist while I was in captivity. Couldn't do much about it in what was a trial by public opinion long before I ever got to a court. So I wanted to understand from experts. So I spoke to Adam Kinzinger, who appears on my video, and talks about how the definitions and the Geneva Conventions and how modern day war fits into that. So to cut a long story short, it doesn't matter where you come from or what country you come from or your motivations for joining a military like the Russian military or the Ukrainian military. You're still entitled to the Geneva Conventions and POW status. I wasn't entitled to that. I didn't get that. So part of that was what I wanted to see what we were doing on our side in the treatment of Russian POWs. And I was quite shocked when I went, what turned out to be a real sort of a YouTube update and just a general interest piece I was doing for my YouTube channel has now turned into a full documentary. We've now had to get help and talk to people. We talked to some of the prisoners in a prisoner of war camp on the west side of Ukraine. It was really interesting to get a rapport with them. The criteria was that we didn't want, we wanted them to know we weren't journalists, that we were actually POWs. And what happened was quite strange. There was almost they were inquisitive and wanted to understand what happened to us, and which shows you sort of some of the freedoms they've got to be able to talk while they're held in Ukraine as prisoners.
And you filmed inside that prison and managed to speak to prisoners. What did they tell you?
Well, what happened was we weren't really sure what to expect. We had a brief beforehand. We were shown around sort of elements of the prison, and when we went into the courtyard of where the prisoners were living, they were already just walking around, which was something that not even we had. We didn't have an outside area where we could walk around. So already I was quite shocked how exposed and how close we were to these prisoners. And I was always conscious of the fact they are in captivity. They are held there. So we had to be careful of what questions we asked. And it was a problem at the start because they thought we were journalists. And basically word got around quite quickly that we weren't journalists after trying to speak to a couple of them. But they don't have to speak to us. We made a point of saying that several times. And in the end, we spoke to a guy from Wagner who was there, who was really wanted to get out of a 15-year jail term in Russia. And it was quite entertaining. He sort of turned around and talked to us and really wanted to know about our time in captivity. And Russian prisons are bad. And what became apparent was that he was then interviewing me with the freedoms to ask me about my captivity, and he was allowed to talk about the negative side of his captivity, and that was with guards around who were not really armed, had no batons. Most of them had no batons. It was a real sort of contrast to my time in captivity.
It's interesting. How did that person react when you told them the kind of torture you endured yourself when you were being held by Russian authorities?
Well, as you can see in the clip, there was unexpected a bit of, well, that's why I joined the Russian military, because it was so bad. I mean, and I sort of said, well, I'd probably done the same thing. But, you have to develop a bond with these people, which became apparent when we told them and word got round that we were actually former Russian POWs, and what we were trying to do was trying to get them home so we can get our guys back. And that was the intent of doing what we did. We promised them that we wouldn't identify them. We promised that they would be not exposed to the media. But obviously we have to prove that we went and these questions were asked. And they were quite responsive in that, talking to us, about not just the prison itself, but some were sort of saying it's a show prison, and we were saying, well, there was none of that in Russia, even if you think it's a show prison.
And what did they tell you about their experiences of fighting for Russia?
We didn't ask that, to be honest. We had to be governed by the Geneva Conventions. Because we weren't exposed to that. We were not given POW status. We were actually put in general population on the Russian side and not given POW status. And the Geneva Conventions, obviously, mine's a very well documented tale. I was electrocuted, stabbed. I couldn't mention any of that. I didn't want to make their life miserable, wanted to stick with the Geneva Conventions. Our primary task was to really not judge them, to listen to them, and really just ask Christians, how did you get to fight for Russia when you've come from, other parts of the world? Really just concentrate on what they had to say based on that. But part of it was, if we had a long chats beforehand, and we thought if we don't tell them that we were former prisoners of war, then we expose, like we're doing now, talking about this situation. Why are me and Aidan the only ones since 2002, people that weren't born in Ukraine, to be exchanged? Why has it stopped? Then if that comes out, then basically it's going to look like we didn't tell them the whole truth before they came to talk to us. So it was really important that we were disclosed who we were before they admitted to come and talk to us.
Did you find it an enriching experience? Because when I hear that you went into prison to talk to your former enemies, it must have been quite a hard pill to swallow. Or did the professional side of you just kick in?
It was 3 years ago. So I've done a lot of talks about that. I'm also resistance trained. I'd had some training in that before I went to Ukraine with the British military. I did see a survival, evade, resist, and escape training, and way back some 20, 30 years ago in America. So I was already sort of understanding the situation before I was captured, what I could expect. So it wasn't a shock. So when I went back there, it was that you can't help draw comparisons. I mean, and but you understand that the period, you understand when he talks to me, and he says that this is different to where I was first captured, and where I was held before I'm at now. And you understand that as a prisoner the other side, because the point of capture is the most dangerous time, and you could be in makeshift cellars, makeshift areas where this is your first step of going back into the system of being a POW, and they are different. It's worlds apart where he is now to where he started his journey, but he's ready to go home. So we focused on that. Do you want to go home? Do you fear going home? And he said, no, I want to go home. As we want our guys back too. And then that's where they opened up and started to talk to us about their experience there.
And Russian forces have now lost around 1 million troops, either killed, injured, or missing. You were talking a little bit earlier about the numbers of troops that are recruited from outside Russia. What did you learn about that?
That was very interesting. I personally, like many, think they come for the money. It's the primary driver. What we found out from talking to many of them, that it isn't. There are professional soldiers that are coming from these places who come for the money, and the money is quite large, and more money than they've ever seen in a lifetime. Some of these people were coming out of places in Africa that were the slums, and predominantly the repetitive story we had from them was that there's a bigger picture here, that their primary motivator was really to get out, and they would go anywhere, not just Russia. One guy had said, I applied to come to France, I applied to come to America, and I was rejected. I applied to go to Germany, I was rejected. So Russia was the only country that was accepting us in. And they relaxed the laws. Within 2 weeks, he was in Russia. And he said, what became more common was that we understood that they fall down this path of staying past their visa date. They can't get work. Some of them go down a criminal route. And that's where Russia just picks them up and then says, do you want to fight for us? And we can give you this money. You can get citizenship. Or we take you back to your country of origin. And many of them just say, yeah. I mean, one guy must have been 8 stone wringing wet. He was sitting in front of me, not a soldier from the Middle East. And he was just, one of them asked us to ring his mum. And that's how he said, I haven't spoke to my mum for, yeah, we did. Yeah, we videoed it. And we're just looking at how we could present that in a dignified way. And she was very, very happy to hear from us. Actually, the only person I knew that spoke Arabic was Brahim, who was on who had death penalty with us. And I said, would you mind ringing the mum of one of the guys we met? He can't get word to her. He hasn't got word to her in several months. And when he rang her, she said she's over the moon. She hadn't heard from him for 8 months. She's glad he's alive. And then we're trying to now put her in contact with the Ukrainian authorities so she can speak to her son, because they are able to accept parcels and letters and from parents. It's just a lot of these guys don't have family in Russia. They're still in the places of origin. So this is another problem that we talk about on the piece.
And do you have an idea of numbers and of how many troops are being recruited from outside Russia?
I don't. There was a lot there. There are 5 other sites. We only visited one. So there is a lot. And I did talk to some journalists who were on the walk with us from those countries. One of them
And so
was
there were journalists there as well then?
yeah, they were. We made a point of sort of detaching ourselves from them and saying that we're not journalists, which we got more, people come to us than they did. But one of them was an expert tracking these cases and said that a lot of the contracts are in Russian, and she's got a copy of a contract, and the problem is not just the Russian authorities. She gets threats from gangs, middlemen. The criminal underworld who are facilitating these these foreign fighters to go to countries where there's a Russian consulate or embassy where they can then get them over, get a holiday visa, and go over to Russia, which was really interesting to understand. Then you realise that when you speak to them, the primary driver isn't the money; that's a secondary. Their primary driver is to get a better life and get out of where they live.
Did you get a sense of soldiers or prisoners there who'd actually been tricked into fighting for Russia?
We did. We asked one guy who, a couple of them were students who stayed past their visa and quite openly told us that. One of them had had a drugs conviction. And I said, did you feel that the drugs conviction was, do you accept responsibility for it? And he said, yeah. He said, I was in the wrong and I got convicted. And they came to the prison and said, do you want to come and fight for the military and you'll get your citizenship? And I just said, yeah. So they're picking up. What became apparent was that the Russian soldier, in many cases, is really the worst people in society. It's generally a mix of people that have got convictions for murder, drugs. There's alcoholics. There's drug dealers, and probably worse, who are being picked up at the prisons and told to come out. And I can relate to that because 150 prisoners were taken from my prison when I was at Makivka 97, when I was in captivity. So, I've been in the prison where they've drawn them out. So it is, and when they're captured, the Ukrainians have to really medically evaluate these people. And it's a real task because you don't know someone's character. If they're pulling, if they've got drugs habit, health issues, HIV, mental issues, you don't know this. And the Ukrainians have a really short time of evaluating these people when they get them as to whether they're safe to put with other people. I mean, this is something that you don't realize until you've been to somewhere like that and learn what they have to do to deal with the influx of Russian prisoners.
Of course, one of the few positive results of the Istanbul peace ceasefire talks is the prisoner exchanges that have taken place. No exact numbers on that at the moment. But what happens to those former POWs when they return to Ukraine once the euphoria of the reunion is over? Is there a system to rehabilitate and support them?
Well, it was difficult because one of the conversations we had with the prisoners, the Russian prisoners were very scared about being, as part of an exchange, going back to their country of origin. Unfortunately, I had to tell them the facts about my case, that I wasn't allowed back to Ukraine. I had to go to Saudi Arabia and then go to my country of origin, UK, even though I'd lived in Ukraine for several years, had legal status in Ukraine, my wife's in Ukraine, I pay my taxes in Ukraine. I'd spent more time in Ukraine over the last several years than I did in the UK. So that scared them. And I can't say for certain they will, in their countries that they've come from, they're going to get any rehabilitation. I mean, look at Brahim, who was given us the death sentence, had to go back direct to Morocco. Now he can't get out of Morocco. So there's no rehabilitation there. But the Ukrainians have that. The Ukrainians have rehabilitation for their prisoners. But unfortunately, we just don't know the English prisoners and the well-documented Australians that are captured on the Russian side. They will have those facilities in their respective countries when they do come back. And I had that with Hostage UK and counselling and to make sure that I was okay. Still check on me now 3 years later, once every 6 months, give me a ring. So, how are you doing? Yeah, I'll see you on TV. Yeah, I'll talk about it. So.
And you mentioned earlier that there haven't been any releases or prisoner exchanges of foreign prisoners since your release. Is that right?
As far as I know, Yes, I'll be happy if someone corrected me if I'm wrong, but me and Aidan were talking about it. We don't think there are foreign exchanges since me and Aidan were exchanged. I'd be, I'm pretty sure that that's the case. And the Russians that we spoke to kept saying, we're watching all the ethnic Russians go. Why are we still here? One guy has been there, a year and 8 months. He's just watched everybody else go on exchanges, and the same the foreign fighters that fight for Russia are still stuck in captivity, wondering when they're going to get exchanged. So it was a common thing they kept talking to me about, and I kept saying to the Russian soldiers, look, do you realise that I wasn't given any Red Cross, International Red Cross? There is no humanitarian aid looking after Ukrainian prisoners, especially ones that were born outside of Ukraine. There is no humanitarian, and that delays things. And we didn't know that. Many didn't know the geopolitical situation because they've come from Africa or South America, or I don't want to sort of highlight the countries individually that we spoke to because it could endanger them, but they've come from those sorts of places. They don't know the geopolitical situation, and the contracts they were given are not in their native language, and so you have to be really careful about the questions you ask them without alarming them and get them. So we were quite limited in that sort of area.
Of course, and if it is true that there haven't been any foreign prisoner exchanges since your release, that's 3 years. It's 2022 coming up to.
So we're asking why. It's quite a straightforward swap, you would think, 20 for 20, or, there's Chinese been captured, North Koreans been captured. So, it isn't quite an easy swap. Why they're not getting the same treatment, I don't know. But from what I'm told is that many of the foreign fighters that fight for Russia don't have family. There's no one shouting for them inside Russia. So unfortunately, those guys are probably going to be in a Ukrainian prison of war camp for a long time to come.
There have been recent reports highlighting the impact on Russian society of battle-hardened war veterans, some who may well have been criminals, as you've spoken about, returning home, perhaps contributing to a spike in crime. What impact do you think Ukrainian veterans returning from the front lines are having and will have on Ukrainian society?
I don't think it's the same. I really don't. And now I'm not being, and I'll tell you why. One of the reasons is because Ukraine identifies that they need a policy for the ever-growing veterans inside Ukraine. I talk about that in Lviv recently. 1.3 million veterans and a community. They're getting support from other countries like America and the UK and various other countries. And they had a convention in Lviv quite recently where we talked about the plight of. I sort of represented the foreigners. And talking about the issues they have, with language, culture. When they come back from the front, do they stick around? Do they go home? You're going to get it, but everybody's in the same boat here. It's not like you're going to Afghanistan or Iraq and then coming back and nobody has an idea of what you've seen, what you've done, the fights you've been in, because everyone in Ukraine has had someone either captured, injured, killed. They know somebody, and today, Kiev's just been hit again. So everybody can identify it. So it's not like they're coming off the front lines, coming back to normality. It's not. The war still goes on. So it is slightly different. So even my time in the military, when I used to go to Ireland, come home, and then I'd go to Bosnia and come home. Nobody really understands what was happening in Bosnia at the time, and. But it is different. There's a lot of self-therapy here, but there are routes in Ukraine where you can get therapy, and they run those routes. And I'm quite happy to come on and talk about it another time. Whereas Russia, these foreigners, the more foreigners that are involved fighting for Russia, they're going to go back to these countries, and that's not going to be available to them. So you could end up with this war spreading to other countries and making more problems there.
And interesting, looking forward to the future, it does look like Ukraine is going to be populated with a lot more dual nationality passport holders. The parliament in Ukraine has supported this bill allowing Ukrainian citizens to hold passports of foreign countries, which simplifying the process for foreigners who want Ukrainian passports. What is the purpose of that, and what effect do you think that will have?
It is. It's something that's long overdue. This bill's been in there for a long time, and it is what the guys here call a unicorn. That's just made it a bit more easier to get this citizenship should you require it, and you fulfil the contracts. It is something that's very problematic here. A lot of foreign workers volunteers who come here get 3 months, including for my charity, Prevail. They get 3 months, and then they have to leave, and then leave for a certain period, and then come back to Ukraine. And that's real problematic because it means we can't get sort of stability with staff. And it's very difficult when they want residency and they want to stay. They can't get that because they a lot of, unless you have a property in Ukraine. Basically, the problem is there's this feeling that if you register your property, that you're entitled to the property, which is not the case. So many landlords don't like foreigners coming into Ukraine registering that particular property that they're paying for when they apply for their visas. So it's very difficult unless you know somebody here who's willing to let you do that, to get your residency. Then you get the language, and then it's regional and done by a blast, which is even more problematic because even I struggle sometimes to get. When I was exchanged, I wanted my documents replaced, and it was like, well, you're Brit, you're British, you're not even on my computer. There's no box to tick for you. So the laws come in, but the structure has a problem in keeping up with that, especially now that Russia's at war with Ukraine. It just slows the process up. So hopefully it's there. We will be able to get that, but it has been a problem in the past.
You've just been in Britain and you're now in Poland on your way back. Having spent time in the UK and also Poland, how would you compare the two countries and their preparedness and awareness of the threat posed by Russia?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't. An ex-military man, I think we're in a better place than we were 2 or 3 years ago. When I was hearing NATO standards and the instructors, I was at the other end of it. We're talking to Ukrainians, and they were telling me that they just don't understand what we're fighting in. If I talk from my own personal experience, when I came to Ukraine with those NATO standards. What the Ukrainians taught me is about trench warfare, how to live off the land, how to supplement your logistics because they're so bad, how to avoid drones as best you can, not carry the big bits of kit with the jetpacks that you're taught in the British Army that you need to walk around with everywhere because you won't get through the trenches. I did 9 years in the British Army, and my commander in the Ukrainians was saying, lose this, get rid of this, slim that down. But then I was thinking, this is just no. You need to be fast, agile, quick when you're going through those trenches. Weight may kill you, and you're quite often going out with just battle gear, very little food, and you're picking food up en route. That was before the full-scale invasion and the development of drones, sort of 2 or 3 years later from the days of the initial invasion. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in the military now. How do you supply? How do you get ammo to positions when how do you get casualties out when every part of the line is being watched? The fast forward 2 or 3 years from the start of the initial invasion, very much it's a different attitude. You now have Ukrainian instructors working out of Poland, and they're listening. I mean, who can teach Ukrainians about drone warfare? I mean, they've taken back dominance of the Black Sea, and they don't have a conventional navy. I mean, it's like you can't teach them anything. So they are going to be the leaders of the future on how to fight Russia because they're very good at it. And if Ukraine loses, what I tell people, if Ukraine loses, you're going to get forced conscription. Ukrainians are then going to be forced to fight against Europe. And all those technological and innovations that people marvel at that Ukrainians have developed will then be Russian. So this war is really important because it doesn't end if Ukraine's taken. It just shifts the front lines.
It's a very sobering thought when you put it like that. And when you were in London, you were on a panel in Parliament or setting up, giving your updates on Ukraine. What did you want to communicate? What came of it?
Well, part of it was that I don't think. I mean, there's only myself and Aidan and John Hernan, and really can talk about prisoners of war with any clarity, having been on both sides and as prisoners of war. So we went to Parliament. We was invited to Parliament to talk about the conditions you could expect if you're taken prisoner by Russia. So we talked about that. We talked about trying to we raised the issue as well about why our foreign fighters, why are we the last foreign fighters? I hate using that term, but just for this, I'll use it. People not born in Ukraine who fight for Ukraine. Why we were the last to be exchanged? Why are they not being considered for exchanges? What's going on? And also how we can move forward with better rehabilitation and how Russia doesn't use the Geneva Conventions. Quite often the foreign fighters that are captured in Russia are used as a public tool, mercenary Nazi terrorists before they even get to a court, and then the courts decide in a sham trial that they're mercenaries and terrorists. We wanted to highlight that. To say, they're not mercenaries, they're entitled to Geneva Conventions, and Russia isn't abiding by the Geneva Convention. Look at the state of the soldiers coming out, including my friend recently from Mariupol. I mean, they're dropping 35 kilos in weight. They're not being fed. They're under brutal torture, systemic torture. Yes, Ukraine doesn't get it always right, but Ukraine's audited by the ICRC. Russia doesn't allow any humanitarian aid groups, independent humanitarian aid groups inside to check on the welfare of Ukrainian POWs. We wanted to raise that and talk about that because it is something that really just gets overlooked.
I'm sure. And you wrote about your experiences famously of surviving imprisonment as a POW and torture by your Russian captors in your book, Live, Fight, Survive. I understand your story could soon reach an even wider audience as a feature film. What's the progress on that?
Yeah, we was a Ukrainian producer approached us and asked if I was interested in turning the book into a film, and I was quite shocked. I mean, it came at a time when everything was just going upside down, and and then next thing you knew, Tom Hardy's dad, Chips, is writing the script for it, and we talk regularly, and hopefully, touch wood, if everything goes to plan, you never know how these things are going to go. Yeah, the Live, Fight, Survive will be another medium that Ukraine needs to be able to tell its story, which will be great for Ukraine, and also show the plight of prisoners that are being held still in captivity 3 years later. So I was quite fortunate that I was exchanged. They wanted a Russian so bad that they exchanged us. So hopefully we get to tell my story, because one of the problems I had was I couldn't tell it while I was in captivity, and that narrative was already branded by Russia, and I'm still fighting it now. I'm a mercenary Nazi and a terrorist, which I'm none of any of them.
About the war in Ukraine,
and just to finally, Shaun, on a personal note, is it possible for you now
you can
to
also
plan
get
for
more
the future,
analysis by
and
listening to Times
allow
Radio
yourself
or
to think of
read
how Ukraine will emerge from this war?
But for now, thank you for watching.
I do. It's very difficult to gauge. So far, I mean, the peace talks that happened earlier this year, I was saying don't put too much faith in them, because it didn't look like they understood the situation here at all. And look who they sent. I won't get too deep into that, but I've been right about that. I can't see an immediate and sudden end to this. I've been right about that. I think Ukraine's doing exceptionally well, and Russia's already lost 55% of what they initially gained in 2022, lost Syria, lost dominance of the Black Sea. I think Russia's already lost with 1 million casualties, and they're taking a kilometer, and that makes front page news yet. And Russia bombing Kiev, which makes front page news. It looks like that's what Putin wants. He wants it to look like we're annihilating Ukraine, when really the reality is, I live in Dnipro. Large parts of the day, you wouldn't even realise there's a war on. I mean, it's large parts of the city are not attacked. There's still business goes on, coffee shops open, work carries on. You know, it's very difficult to see an immediate ending to this. But for everyone's sake, I hope there is, and I hope it's beneficial to Ukraine.
Shaun Pinner, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.